So let's talk game emulation. So particularly on iOS. So game emulators have been banned from the Apple App Store for a long time now. The only way that you could run these game emulators before was if you jailbroke your phone. There's some other ways you can do it, but generally you had to jailbreak your phone, which basically voids your warranty and against terms of service for Apple stuff. But a lot of people would. It was one of the reasons that people actually jailbroke their phones was to run game emulators. But they are now allowed officially on app stores globally. So it's basically part of Apple's compliance with that European Commission's new anti-steering guidelines. That's why we're seeing these. And Apple have said, okay, here you go. You can do these. So basically, if you don't know, an emulator it's a piece of software. It emulates the original gaming hardware. So it allows you to run most games. So let's say we're talking about systems like Game Boys, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color, what else? Nintendo or NES, Nintendo Entertainment Systems, Super Nintendo Entertainment System, PlayStation in some cases, a whole bunch of these older game systems, Sega Genesis, yeah, a bunch of old systems that you can now basically you can emulate their old hardware in software form on iOS. So a couple of these have come out now. They've been put on the App Store. One in particular, the iGBA, which is the Game Boy Advance emulator. It was in the App Store for about a week. I did manage to snag it. I do still have it on my phone. It does work still, but it's no longer available in the store. And it's because apparently it got pulled by Apple because it used somebody else's copyright work, which is interesting.
It's kind of the whole point of game emulators.
Right. It used a clone of something called GBA4 iOS, which is a decade-old emulator, apparently. He just ripped off the code and he put it up as his own, and so they pulled it down. Since then, though, another one's been put up, one called Bimmy, which is a Nintendo emulator, was up for a second. This one came down because the guy who put it up, the developer, pulled it down himself because he believed he was going to have some kind of copyright issues, which is what we'll talk about here in a second. Also, today, there's a brand new one today. The guy that originally wrote GBA4 iOS has released his. It's called Delta. And that came out today. It's this app right here. So this app, not only is it Game Boy, but it also does Nintendo, Super Nintendo, N64, and DS all in one application. And you can run all these games. So here's how this basically works. You can play these games. You can legally play open source games on it. Or you can illegally play any game that you like from any of these systems because they're just downloadable online through something called a ROM. So here's my argument for this. Anybody that tells you they're running homebrew, open source, whatever on these is just absolutely full of crap. It's the 0.0001% of people that are doing that. Everybody's playing illegal ROMs on these, and this is why Apple didn't allow it in the first place. So, Bobby, what do you think? Do you think anybody's playing these without the illegal games on them? Do you think it's piracy?
Can I get Pokemon Black and White on it?
Yes, you can. Okay. Any game that you has ever been released. Yes, you can.
Yeah, because I remember my kids growing up and they were playing Pokemon games. I remember having to help them, and I think it was Black and White one time on a DS.
Yep.
And I'm a hardcore gamer, so like I'm used to like shooters or whatever. And I'm thinking, what am I doing with my life here? Like this little bike has to run through this thing. I'm like, what are we doing? We got to get to better games, guys. I help you in.
Yep.
So the question I have here: who gets sued here by Nintendo if
Everybody.
something happens? Is it
100%.
Apple or the creator?
No. Well, Apple's going to say no because you forced them to put this on their store.
And
the EU has literally told them they have to put this on their store to remain in the EU.
And that's what I'm getting at. I don't know if it's passive aggressive is the term for this, but like Apple is basically being like, all right, okay, yeah. You want to play this game? You want to play this game? We're okay with this game.
Yep.
You know, you want to, and so it's
Nintendo will be suing somebody. Yeah, yes, I agree. It's just who.
That's what they do. That's what they do.
So does Nintendo sue Apple on purpose so that Apple can turn around and say, we don't want these?
Maybe.
Ooh.
They make a deal with Nintendo to sue them. Yeah.
Yeah. Please sue us. Please.
Yeah, please.
We'll give you $20 million.
Also, somebody put a Switch emulator on the Apple Store so I could play some Switch.
Switch games.
I don't know if Switch is up there yet because I think the hardware's too advanced, I think.
Yeah.
But there might be. I'm not sure.
I
know
don't
this
think
one
so.
doesn't
I
right
think
now, but-
iPhone is way better. Like Nintendo's really known for underdeveloping their,
True.
GPUs for.
I've
their
never
gaming
heard someone
system.
say,
It's
"Well, that
like,
Switch hardware is really advanced." I've
Right.
never
it's
heard
like,
that.
yeah, like, I don't think. Do you even have a Switch? Like, I'm just one of my it's just like. Do you
I
know
don't
what
think
it
it's
does?
that advanced. I think
Ooh,
it's
that
the emulation
OLED
part of
then.
it.
Well, my favorite videos to watch about Switch is like when they port a game that's clearly not made for the Switch, and
Yeah.
like the ingenuity these engineers have to go through to make it
Yes.
look not like a
True.
potato, but it still does. It's like wow.
Here's the thing. There are still some games that you still can't even emulate because of something to do with the hardware. There were some games that actually had chips in the cartridge that had some kind of extra thing that's like very difficult to emulate. So even stuff from N64 days and those kind of like chips are still difficult to emulate. So it's not necessarily a hardware thing as much as, I don't know, it's something weird about them. That's why I say most games you can download as ROMs. Not all of them. Not all of them actually work. You can't really emulate all of them for some reason. I don't know why, but yeah, it's just it's piracy, right? I mean, whatever way you want to put it, I put a threads up about this. Say, hey, anybody that thinks this isn't piracy and using it for any other reason is just delusional, right? And then somebody answered me back saying, like, yeah, but what's the moral issue with playing games that are 30 years old that you can no longer buy? And I'm like, good point. The point is then you don't like copyright because that's what you're fighting against.
Yeah.
You're saying I don't believe in copyright. Then
I think like it's a two-way argument because I've bought games on Steam, which
You rented the game on Steam.
the company
Yes.
no, hold on a second. Let me finish my statement, please. All right, can I make a point?
You've taken his punchline.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I know. Way to take my thunder away from my. Anyway, so I bought the game. When you try to play it now, you can't. And it's no longer on Steam. And it used to be a AAA game in the back. So I rented the game for the amount of time for $70. Jesus Christ. And so I feel like preserving games, there's an argument to be made to preserve games through emulation.
Sure.
But it is like a fine line. But I still like I mean, I have very mixed feelings about Apple. I like the Apple phone. I don't know about like and their Apple products, but I know that there's I don't know. But it's hilarious to me how they're just able to do stuff like that. They're like not happy with the result, and they're like, you know what? Fine, we'll flood the market with all these emulators and let people have better experience playing their emulated games on wonderful iPhones rather than let's say Nintendo Switch or something. I'm not saying there's a Nintendo Switch emulator there, but wouldn't be funny.
Now, these emulators already exist on Android, right? Because I don't play these
Yes.
kind of games, so I'm assuming that they already exist on Android, right?
For sure.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
Yes. But I'm guessing the issue here is going to be the same thing we talked about before when you talk about when it becomes more of an issue in the US where Nintendo can still sell these things and they do still sell them. It's not, these aren't all cartridges that you can't buy right now. You can still buy a Nintendo. You can still buy the cartridges. There's still a market for this technically.
We still have
products-
original Nintendo. Yeah.
But
Yes.
the argument though here is the same as like I have ripped DVDs on my computer of the ones that I purchased, and
Right.
I have and it's just a way to have a backup of the
Sure.
data, just like all
My
the
Plex
games
server is all
I
of
purchased.
that. Yeah.
Sure.
And I just wanted to have a digital copy. No, I did purchase all the stuff. Like,
But here's the thing,
Yeah.
look. You can go to this website right here and I can download Super Mario Brothers ROM and I have it on my phone in 30 seconds.
But if
Like,
you own
that's
the
copyright.
game,
That's illegal.
But
I'm
I-
not
Zelda's
supposed to
a
be able
good
to do
game,
that.
though.
But you
Zelda's a
could-
really good game.
own the game, and then you could rip it and run it on an
Well,
emulator.
Maybe.
Yeah. So that's a good question. If I have because I legit have the original Nintendo cartridge for a lot of these games. If I have that cartridge and I download it here, am I violating copyright?
100%.
I think you are still,
Yeah.
yes.
Right. I mean,
Yes.
but I think that's what Paul's point is. Like, I
Yeah,
have a
but that's-
DVD and I rip the DVD onto my Plex server. It's the same kind of thing.
But
you
it's
know.
more of a bigger problem, isn't it? It's the problem is you can say like, while that seems like that might be morally okay, it's not legally okay. So it's like we have to change the copyright laws then. It's like
Yeah.
it just is what it is. It just that's the way it is, and it's downloading these from this site and running them on your emulator isn't legal, right?
Right.
You're violating copyright. But you can. I'm not saying that I did test this with a Mario game and get it to work. I'm not saying that, but it would.
But I'm not saying it.
Yeah, and I'm not saying Donkey Kong on Delta is great because I wouldn't have played it because but I'm sure it is. And it would take you all of literally seconds to get this set up. We're talking about like the setup is so simple. It's unbelievable. You literally download the app, your little plus sign, you go to a website and download one of these ROM files, and you say add.
Yeah.
and
the
boom,
ROM
the game
files are
plays.
super small too. Like
They
these
are.
games are
Yeah.
teeny.
Yes,
And
they are.
does it emulate the controls, or what do you do? Just put
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it does. Yeah, it emulates the controls based on the system look. So it's
Okay.
touch screen. So, or on this Delta version, which I have not played with yet, but I have downloaded, you can Bluetooth controller to it. So,
Up, down, left, right.
yep, that's it.
I just think it's because Apple has such a good relationship with the EU. They just wanted to listen to everything they said, and they
Yeah.
wanted to spread the love of emulation out of the goodness of their heart to allow
Sure.
everybody to play video games that might not have access to them, like on their fancy iPhones.
Yeah, that brings me to like what I wrote down about this story is like regulations changing technology. And you know me and how I'm not a super fan of Apple, but I'm also not a fan of the EU basically forcing them to put things in their store that they normally would not allow in their store, especially something as problematic as this. Like,
Well, I wonder why the emulators the hill the EU wanted to die on. Like, why is it? Why is
don't
it
know.
that? Like, it's clearly for copyright purposes. There's no other reason for it.
Yeah.
I don't think it was mentioned, like, I don't think it's specifically emulators, but I think it was like game distribution. And
Okay.
like, if you're looking at the actual like regulation, it's like Steam, where it's like a game distribution platform that this kind of falls under and goes with that. Like, so I think it wasn't necessarily that like, oh, we have to allow emulators. It was like they have to allow this type of thing. This falls under that type.
Yep. Here's the thing: there is no Nintendo version of this application, at least
Should be.
yet,
Sure.
that allows for the legal purchase of these. There isn't. And I agree, there probably should be. What should have happened here is Nintendo should have just made their own version of an emulator on an iPhone and push that out and allow you to buy the app, buy the games on it.
Games,
And
right.
maybe that's where we end up, because
Yeah.
maybe that's then they're going to come back and like they'll end up having to remove these.
I don't
Because
think
they
they'll-
will.
I
Yeah.
don't think they'll ever do that because they really love suing people. Because it's just much more
This is
fun for
true, too.
Nintendo because they could have done this so long
Yes.
ago, but instead they're just like, no, we're
Yeah.
not going to have a release version of this game anymore. You could never play it again.
I'm with
And so
Kevin.
you're
I think
forced to.
Nintendo's missing out here. They should make an emulator and
Of
then make a
course.
Game Pass,
For
just
sure.
like
Of course.
Xbox.
100%.
does.
They should. I would
Yeah.
buy it.
I would buy the
Absolutely.
Switch
So many
finally
people
if
would
that
buy
was
it.
the
Yeah.
case. It's the same
You
thing with
wouldn't
like
need a Switch though at that point because they can
true,
just
but,
you know,
but I would
send
actually
the
still
system.
buy one, because I would appreciate the service.
You're like, I
Um,
support.
It's like the same thing with like when, like for instance, back in the day in the college years, like Napster was a thing, and everybody loved downloading stuff from Napster. And now it's like so easy and convenient through all these streaming services to get music that it almost takes way more effort to try to get those like the music the
Yeah.
old fashioned way. And it
Yeah.
would be
Yep.
same with emulators. If they made the process very easy, no one will go not just out of the sheer convenience of it through the process of trying to get ROMs from illegal sites or like what have
Right.
you and put on like if
Agreed.
you make it that's what they should do for sure.
Yep.
But they like suing people.
Yeah. So like to Paul's point, for as illegal as Napster was, there's no doubt that it completely changed how we consume music. Like whether that was heading in that direction or not, like the Napster was the catalyst to like force it out, and that it worked. I mean, like, and I think it's in the that Facebook movie. I forget what the Facebook
Yeah.
movie is called.
Social network.
Social network.
Social Network. Yeah. He's like, you want to buy a Tower Records? Like, nope, because they don't exist anymore.
Yep.
Because it totally changed the whole industry.
It's also the
Yeah.
plot line of Italian Job. So
Right. Oh, I know. I'm the Napster
the real
because I was napping.
Oh, that's a good line. Yeah, I remember
I
that
love
part.
that.
So I wonder if this will force Nintendo into the game then, or like Paul says, force them to sue. I'm kind of with Paul. I think I'd like them to get into the game and force an app onto here. I think it'd be great. but I think they're more likely to sue. And the question is, who do they sue? Do they sue, like in this guy, this is an individual person that created this Delta app? Do they sue the people who make the apps? Or because there's nothing technically they're doing wrong, technically, because they're just, it's the facilitation part.
Yeah.
It's the same as Napster, right? But again, Napster got sued. Napster wasn't sharing files, but they were the facilitator. So is it the same kind of thing? Or do they go after Apple?
I think they might have to at some point go after Apple because like for two reasons. Number one, from like, I'm not saying that like when a single developer makes an emulator, like for whatever reason, like they're obviously not. Well, I don't know how much money they're making. They're not making billions. It's not like
it's
Apple.
A free app. There's
right. It's right. And so the point is, what they typically do with folks like that, I forgot there's a term for it, but they will sue you beyond the universe to set an example for other people not to do it. So it's like that person who developed that emulator would be like the fall guy, and none of these big corporations would get anything, and somehow maybe something will happen. But I think what I would like to happen is Nintendo sue Apple and then go from there, and then somehow